The rain fell in heavy sheets, blurring the neon signs of the city into streaks of red and blue. Emma pulled her coat tighter, cursing herself for forgetting her umbrella. The bus wasn't coming for another hour, and her phone had died. She needed shelter, anywhere dry would do. That's when she saw him. A man in a long black coat, walking briskly down the sidewalk. He didn't have an umbrella either, but he moved with purpose, unfazed by the storm. Something about him was different. The way his footsteps didn't splash. The way the rain seemed to avoid him. Emma hesitated. Following a stranger was insane. But then, a flicker of movement, just for a second, his shadow didn't match his body. It stretched too far, twisted at an impossible angle. Then it was normal again. Her breath hitched. Did I imagine that? Before she could talk herself out of it, she stepped forward, trailing him at a distance. The man turned down an alleyway, narrow, dimly lit, the kind of place you'd never enter alone. But Emma's curiosity burned hotter than her fear. She crept closer, her shoes barely making a sound. At the end of the alley stood a door. Old, wooden, with a rusted handle. The man pulled out a key, except it wasn't a key. It was a small, jagged bone. He slid it into the lock, and the door creaked open. A gust of warm air rushed out, carrying a scent Emma couldn't place, like old books and something metallic. The man stepped inside. The door began to close. This is your last chance to turn back. She sprinted forward, catching the door just before it shut. The inside was nothing like she expected. Instead of a cramped apartment, she stood in a vast, dimly lit hall. The walls were lined with shelves, each holding glass jars, but not pickles or preserves. Inside them floated things that made her stomach lurch. Fingers. Eyes. A heart, still beating. Emma's hands flew to her mouth to stifle a scream. Footsteps echoed. The man was walking deeper into the hall, unaware of her presence. She should run. Now. But then she saw it, a jar labeled, Memories, E. Carter. Her last name. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. The moment her fingers brushed the glass, a flood of images exploded in her mind, a birthday party she didn't remember, a face she'd never seen but knew, a scream ripped from her own throat in a place she'd never been. She dropped the jar. It shattered. The man froze. Slowly, he turned. His eyes locked onto hers, and they weren't human. Pupils like slits, irises a glowing yellow. You weren't supposed to see that, he said, voice like gravel. Emma bolted. The door was still open. She lunged for it, but something snagged her coat, a shadow, alive, coiling around her like smoke. She screamed, wrenching free, and stumbled into the alley. The door slammed shut behind her. She didn't stop running until she reached her apartment, lungs burning. Locking the door, she sank to the floor, shaking. That's when she noticed it. In her hand, clutched so tight her nails had drawn blood, was a single, withered flower. She'd never seen it before. And it smelled like the hall. Emma stared at the flower in her palm, its petals blackened at the edges as if burned. The scent, thick and cloying, filled her apartment, making her dizzy. She threw it onto the coffee table and backed away, as if it might bite. Her reflection in the mirror caught her eye. Something was wrong. A dark smudge streaked across her cheek. She rubbed at it, but it didn't fade. Leaning closer, her breath fogged the glass, and for a split second, another face flickered behind hers. A man's face. The stranger from the alley. She spun around. No one was there. Her phone buzzed violently on the counter, making her jump. A text from an unknown number. You took something that doesn't belong to you. Her fingers trembled as she typed back, who is this? 3 dots appeared. Then, look outside. The curtains were still open. The street lamp across from her building flickered, casting long shadows. At first, she saw nothing. Then, movement. A figure, standing perfectly still under the light. The same black coat. The same unnatural posture. Watching her. Emma yanked the curtains shut. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. She needed answers. The flower. She grabbed it, ignoring the way its stem pulsed faintly in her grip, and shoved it into her pocket. If this was connected to that jar, the one with her name, then she had to go back. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and empty. Emma kept her head down, walking fast. Every shadow seemed to twitch at the corner of her vision. Every passing car made her flinch. The alley looked different in the daylight. Or what should have been daylight. The sky was still dark, the air too still. The door was there, just as before, but now, it was slightly ajar. A trap? Probably. She pushed it open. The hall stretched endlessly, the jars glowing faintly under an unseen light. The man was nowhere in sight. Emma crept forward, her shoes sticking to the floor, not from dirt, but something thick and sticky. She didn't look down. Another jar caught her eye. This one had no label, but inside swirled a mist the color of storm clouds. As she reached for it, a whisper brushed against her ear. "Don't." She jerked back. The voice wasn't the man's. It was hers. A door creaked open somewhere in the hall. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Emma ducked behind a shelf, pressing a hand to her mouth to quiet her breathing. The footsteps stopped. Then, tap, tap, tap. Something was knocking on the glass jars. Coming closer. She risked a glance. The man stood inches away, his back to her, running a finger along the shelves. But his shadow, it moved on its own, slithering across the floor like a snake, searching. Emma's leg cramped. She shifted slightly, and knocked over a jar. It hit the ground with a muffled thud, rolling toward the man. He went still. Then, slowly, he turned. His eyes locked onto hers. "You came back," he said, smiling. "Good." Emma ran. The hall twisted, shelves collapsing behind her as if the room itself was trying to stop her. The door was still open, she could see the alley, but the distance stretched impossibly far. A hand grabbed her wrist. Ice cold. She screamed, wrenching free, and burst into the alley. The door slammed shut behind her. This time, it vanished, leaving only a solid brick wall. Panting, Emma looked at her wrist. 5 finger-shaped bruises were already forming. And clutched in her other hand, a piece of paper she didn't remember grabbing. A single word was scrawled on it. Soon. The bruises on Emma's wrist darkened overnight. By morning, they'd spread like ink under her skin, twisting into strange, jagged patterns. The doctors had no explanation. The police dismissed her story. And the flower she'd taken? It had rooted itself into her coffee table overnight, its vines now creeping up the walls. She tore them down. They grew back faster. The note in her pocket, soon, burned against her thigh like a warning. That's when she noticed the first missing memory. She reached for her mother's name, and it was gone. Just blank space in her mind where a face should be. Panicked, she scrolled through her phone. No contacts. No photos. Just an empty gallery. The jars. The memories. He was taking them. Emma stormed into the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face. When she looked up, the mirror showed her a stranger. Her reflection smiled. She wasn't. "Give it back," she whispered. Her reflection tilted its head, then reached through the glass, fingers brushing her throat. Emma stumbled back, crashing into the wall. The mirror shattered. Shards rained down, and in each one, a different fractured version of her life flashed, a childhood she didn't remember. A funeral she'd never attended. A door, that door, standing open in every memory. She had to end this. The alley was easier to find this time. It called to her, the air thickening as she approached. The door was already there, waiting. No key needed. It swung open before she could touch it. The hall stretched endlessly, but now, some jars were empty. Smashed. Others pulsed with a sickly light. The man stood at the far end, his back to her, humming as he rearranged the shelves. "You're stealing from me," Emma said, her voice steadier than she felt. He didn't turn. "Stealing implies ownership. That's my life in those jars." Finally, he faced her. His eyes weren't yellow anymore. They were hers. "Not just yours," he said softly. "Everyone's." A shadow moved behind her. Emma spun, and froze. Dozens of people stood there, their faces blurred, their bodies flickering like bad reception. Some clutched jars. Others reached for them, mouths open in silent screams. "You're one of the lucky ones," the man continued. "Most never notice what's missing." Emma backed away. "What are you?" He smiled. "The keeper of what's forgotten." A jar toppled from a shelf, shattering at her feet. The mist inside surged up, wrapping around her legs. Images flooded her mind, her first kiss, her grandmother's voice, the smell of rain on summer grass, all being pulled away. She screamed, clawing at her head. "Stop!" The man stepped closer. "It's already done. You walked in. You took. Now you belong here, like the rest." The vines from the flower, her flower, suddenly burst through the floor, tangling around her wrists. They weren't plants at all. They were shadows, alive and hungry. Emma gasped as they yanked her down. The floor gave way. She fell. And landed in her own apartment. Sunlight streamed through the windows. The flower was gone. The bruises? Faded. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mom. Had it all been a nightmare? Then she saw it. On the wall, where the vines had been, 2 words were etched into the paint. "I remember." And outside her window, under the flickering street lamp, the man in the black coat tipped his hat, and vanished.